Means execute the protocol, not tomorrow or when you feel ready, or after you have thought about it more, but now, beginning with the next thought you think and the next action you take after you finish reading these words. The fall does not pause for your convenience. The spiral does not wait for permission to tighten its grip, and gravity does not care about your excuses or your intentions or your promises to change eventually. Stop the fall means radical acceptance of where you actually are. Silent command declaring where you will no longer go. Micro-action proving that the command has teeth, and vigilance ensuring that the drifting thoughts that would pull you back into descent are caught and dismissed before they can rebuild the momentum of decline. This is not one of the things you might do. This is the thing you must do if you want your life to be anything other than the predictable result of patterns you have never examined and momentum you have never interrupted. But through the through the precise application of mental law, the same immutable principles that govern the falling of the plane and the rising of the phoenix. This is not theory to be admired. This is protocol to be executed. The choice, as it always has been, is yours. Continue the spiral into the depths or pull the switch and begin the ascent. What follows is not for the faint of heart. It is for those who are ready to become the masters of their own destiny, to seize the controls from the hands of chaos and fly the aircraft of their lives with the precision of one who has awakened to their true power. James Allen, with the clarity of a surgeon examining a diseased organ, teaches us that the downward spiral is not an act of cosmic injustice, not the cruel whim of an indifferent universe, but rather the precise operation of what he calls the law of cause and effect gaining momentum. Building speed, accumulating mass until it becomes a force that seems unstoppable to those caught within its terrible rotation. Consider the mechanics with cold rationality. A negative thought, perhaps born from a moment of doubt or fear, generates a negative emotional state, which in turn produces a negative action or inaction, and this action creates a negative result in your external circumstances. But here is where the true danger lies, the point at which the spiral becomes self-sustaining. That negative result then feeds back into your consciousness, validating and reinforcing the original negative thought, creating what systems theorists would call a positive feedback loop, though there is nothing positive about it. It is a closed circuit of destruction, a perpetual motion machine of decline. And with each rotation the speed increases, the gravity intensifies, and the possibility of escape seems to recede further into impossibility. Allen observed that men caught in such spirals often speak of feeling as though they are being pulled downward by forces beyond their control, and in a sense, they are correct. But what they fail to understand is that these forces were set in motion by their own mental states, their own initial choices, their own failure to intervene at the point where intervention was still possible. The spiral operates with mathematical precision, indifferent to your suffering, blind to your potential, caring nothing for your dreams or the dreams of those who depend upon you. Each morning you wake with the residue of yesterday's failures clinging to your consciousness like smoke, and before you have even risen from your bed, the negative thought has already begun its work, coloring your perception, shaping your expectations, determining your actions. You tell yourself perhaps that today will be different, that you will break free, that you will change. But these are merely thoughts layered atop thoughts, wishes stacked upon the foundation of a mind that has not yet learned the fundamental principle Allen spent his life illuminating. The principle is this: you cannot stop the spiral through positive thinking alone. You cannot reverse momentum with affirmations. You cannot pull out of the dive by simply wishing you were flying upward instead of plummeting downward. The law of cause and effect does not respond to wishes. It responds only to causes, to actual mental and physical forces applied with precision and sustained with unwavering consistency. To stop the loop, you must do something that most men never do in their entire lives. You must sever the chain at its weakest link, which is not the external circumstance, not the negative result, but the initial negative thought itself, the first domino in the sequence of destruction. But how does one sever a chain of causation that has been forging itself link by link, perhaps for years, perhaps for decades, until it has become as thick as iron cable and seems as permanent as the laws of physics themselves? Alan answers this question with a revelation so profound, so deceptively simple, that most readers pass over it without recognizing its revolutionary implications. The chain can be broken only by the introduction of a new cause, a cause of such different character, such different frequency, such different intention that it cannot coexist with the negative momentum that preceded it. This new cause is not another thought, not another emotion, not another wish or hope or fear. It is an act of will, capital W, the evolved will, that stands outside the chain of mechanical causation, the force within you that is capable of intervening in the machinery of your own psychology and saying, with absolute authority, this pattern ends now. The will is not part of the spiral. It is the force that can step into the spiral and disrupt it, the hand that can reach into the spinning mechanism and pull the emergency brake, the consciousness that can observe the downward momentum and refuse to participate in it for even one more second. Consider what this means in practical terms, in the lived experience of a man who has been caught in the spiral of financial failure, watching his bank account dwindle, his opportunities vanish, his confidence erode with each passing day. The spiral has logic to it, a terrible internal consistency. Because he feels like a failure, he behaves like a failure. And because he behaves like a failure, he produces the results of a failure. And because he sees these results, he feels even more strongly that he is a failure. And round it goes, each cycle deepening the groove, making the pattern more automatic, more inevitable, until he begins to identify himself with the spiral, to believe that he is the spiral, that this downward trajectory is simply who he is and who he will always be. Alan's teaching cuts through this identification with the precision of a diamond cutting glass. You are not the spiral. You are the one who has the power to stop it. And that power resides in a faculty of mind that exists beyond the reach of circumstance, beyond the influence of past results, beyond the gravity of accumulated failure. This faculty is the will, and it is the only force in the universe capable of standing in the middle of a chain reaction and demanding a different outcome. The tragedy Alan witnessed, the tragedy that motivated him to write with such urgency, such moral force, is that millions of human beings live their entire lives without ever discovering this power within themselves, without ever realizing that they possess the master switch that could halt their descent at any moment. They believe themselves to be victims of circumstance, prisoners of their past, powerless before the momentum of negative patterns that have taken root in their lives.
Hello.
Do you want to play with me?
Sure. You want me to help you with your groceries?
Yeah.
They try various remedies. They read books about positive thinking. They repeat affirmations. They visualize success. They make resolutions on New Year's Eve. And yet the spiral continues because none of these methods address the fundamental problem, which is not the content of their thoughts, but the quality of their will. A weak will cannot break a strong pattern. A wavering intention cannot sever a chain of iron. A mind that has not developed the capacity for sustained, focused, unwavering determination cannot interrupt a momentum that has been building for years. This is why Alan speaks of the evolved will. It is a faculty that must be developed, strengthened, trained through use, until it becomes powerful enough to override all the mechanical forces of psychology that would otherwise determine your fate. The law of cause and effect, Alan reminds us, is not cruel, it is simply law, operating with the same impersonal precision as gravity or thermodynamics. A negative thought produces negative results, not because the universe has something against you, but because the architecture of reality is such that causes produce effects that are consistent with their nature. Plant a seed of fear, reap a harvest of paralysis. Plant a seed of resentment, reap a harvest of isolation. Plant a seed of self-pity, reap a harvest of helplessness. The spiral is simply this law in action, momentum building upon momentum, cause producing effect, producing cause in an unbroken chain. But here is the key insight, the lever that moves worlds. Because the spiral is a chain of causes and effects, it can be broken by the introduction of a cause that is radically different from everything that has come before. This is what the will provides. the power to introduce discontinuity into a continuous pattern, to inject a new cause into a system that has been running on automatic, to be the author of a new beginning in the middle of what seemed like an inevitable end. And so we arrive at the threshold of transformation, standing at the point where understanding must give way to action, where theory must yield to practice, where the knowledge of the spiral and the knowledge of the will must combine to produce actual intervention in the machinery of your declining life. Alan does not leave us with mere philosophy. He provides a protocol, a sequence of precise mental maneuvers designed to locate the master switch and pull it with the force necessary to reverse momentum that may have been building for a lifetime. But before we can execute this protocol, we must understand one more crucial aspect of the spiral. It consumes energy at an exponential rate. Every moment you spend caught in the downward rotation is a moment in which your vital force, your creative power, your capacity for focused action is being drained away, burned up in the friction of worry, anxiety, regret, and fear. The spiral is not just pulling you down, it is bleeding you dry, and the longer it continues, the less energy you will have available to pull yourself out. This is why intervention must be immediate, why the decision to pull the master switch cannot be postponed to some future moment when conditions are more favorable or you feel more ready. The spiral does not care about your readiness. It only knows momentum, and every second you delay is another rotation deeper into the vortex. What Alan offers is not hope in the conventional sense, not the shallow reassurance that everything will work out if you just keep trying. What he offers is something far more valuable, a precise map of the territory of causation, showing you exactly where you are in the spiral, exactly how the momentum was created, exactly what force is required to break it, and exactly where that force must be applied for maximum effect. He shows you that the master switch is not external to you, not dependent on changing your circumstances or waiting for better luck or hoping someone will rescue you. The master switch is within you, has always been within you, waiting for the moment when you would finally understand its nature and its location and its proper use. That moment, if you choose to make it so, is now. The spiral continues its rotation, gravity continues its pull, the ocean rushes up to meet the falling plane, but within the cockpit of your consciousness, your hand hovers over the master switch, and the next thought you think, the next decision you make, will determine whether you crash into the depths or pull up into the sky. Alan has shown you where the switch is. Whether you pull it is the only question that matters, the only question that has ever mattered, the only question upon which the entire trajectory of your destiny depends. The will, as James Allen defines it with the precision of a philosopher and the passion of a prophet, is the only force in the human experience capable of intervening in the chain of cause and effect once that chain has acquired momentum and direction. Consider the profound implications of this statement. You live in a universe governed by law, where every effect has a cause, where every result is the inevitable consequence of prior conditions, where the present is always the child of the past.
Melt sales objections with this book. I just got my black book of questions in the mail.
This is the iron framework of reality, and most men, perceiving this framework, conclude that they are prisoners of it, helpless before the momentum of patterns established years ago, condemned to play out the consequences of decisions made when they were ignorant or weak or blinded by desire. Alan's revelation shatters this conclusion with the force of a hammer striking glass. Within this universe of law, within this machinery of cause and effect, there exists one anomaly, one element that is not merely the product of prior causes, but is itself a cause-initiating force. And that element is your will, properly understood and properly applied. The will is not a wish, not a desire, not a hope. It is the power to say no to the entire momentum of the past, to stand in the present moment with full consciousness of where you have been and where you are going, and to dictate, with absolute authority, a new direction. Most men have never experienced this power because they have never developed it, never trained it, never understood its nature or its proper use. They confuse will with stubbornness or with the emotional intensity of a strong desire, or with the temporary surge of motivation that comes from reading an inspiring book or hearing a compelling speech. But these are not the will that Alan speaks of. These are merely the surface movements of a deep ocean, waves that rise and fall while the depths remain undisturbed. The true will, the evolved will, is something far more fundamental. It is the conscious power of choice exercised not in moments of emotional intensity, but in moments of calm clarity. The power to select one direction over another, not because you feel like it, but because you have decided that this is the direction you will go, regardless of feelings, regardless of circumstances, regardless of the momentum that would pull you elsewhere. This will operates from a center of consciousness that is beyond emotion, beyond the turbulent weather of mood and circumstance, a center that ancient philosophers called the self, and modern psychology has largely forgotten how to access. From this center, you can observe the spiral without being caught in it. You can see the patterns without being controlled by them, and most importantly, you can intervene in causation itself. The intervention looks simple from the outside, so simple that most people dismiss it as inadequate to the scale of the problem. It is the power to say no. But understand what this no represents in the architecture of causation. It is a break in the chain, a refusal to allow the next link to be forged, a conscious decision to stop participating in a pattern that has been running on automatic for however long it has been running. When you are caught in a downward spiral of financial failure, your mind generates certain thoughts automatically. I am not good with money. I always fail at this. Opportunities never come to me. I am destined to struggle. These thoughts are not random. They are the next rotation of the spiral, the momentum of the past asserting itself in the present, the pattern demanding to continue. And here, at this precise moment, the will can intervene. Not by replacing the negative thought with a positive one, not by arguing with it or analyzing it or trying to understand where it came from, but simply by refusing to energize it, refusing to allow it to proceed to the next stage where thought becomes emotion and emotion becomes action, and action becomes result. The no is a severance, a cutting of the chain at the point where you have the most leverage, which is always the present moment, always the thought that is occurring right now. But Alan goes deeper still, revealing a dimension of will that separates the merely disciplined person from the true master of destiny. The will is not only the power to refuse the negative, but the power to dictate the new direction that will replace what has been refused. It is one thing to stop the spiral. It is another thing entirely to command the ascent. This is where most attempts at self-improvement fail. They focus on stopping bad habits without establishing new ones, on eliminating negative thoughts without installing positive patterns, on saying no to the past without saying yes to a specific future. The result is a kind of vacuum, a void where the old pattern has been disrupted, but no new pattern has been established, and nature abhors a vacuum. The old momentum will rush back in to fill the space unless you have actively created something to take its place. The evolved will performs both functions simultaneously. It severs the chain of negative causation, and in the same motion establishes a new cause, a new direction, a new standard of thought and action that is non-negotiable, that brooks no compromise, that stands as the new law governing your life. This is not repression, this is replacement. This is not fighting against the old, this is building the new so firmly that the old has no room to return. Alan understood that the power of the will is directly proportional to its clarity and specificity. A vague intention has no power against a specific pattern. A general desire for improvement cannot defeat a concrete habit of self-destruction. The will becomes powerful only when it is focused like a laser, concentrated on a specific point of intervention, executed with precise timing and unwavering commitment. This is why he speaks of the will as that force unseen, not because it is mystical or supernatural, but because its operation is internal, invisible to others, manifesting only in its effects.
As a center admin, I've seen a lot of different people come through here. We had a student come in, he signed up for the course, and
When a man exercises true will, observers see only the result. He stops drinking, he starts saving money, he ends a toxic relationship, he begins a new discipline, but they do not see the internal moment of decision, the point at which the master switch was pulled, the instant when he stood before the momentum of his past and said, with every fiber of his being, "This ends now, and what begins now is something entirely different." That moment is sacred, in the secular sense of the word. It is the moment when a human being transcends the mechanical causation of their psychology and becomes, for one shining instant, the author of their own fate, rather than the character in a story written by their conditioning. The skeptic might ask, if the will has such power, why do so many people fail to use it? Why do addictions persist? Why do financial spirals continue? Why does the downward momentum seem so resistant to intervention? Alan's answer is twofold, and both aspects are crucial to understanding the true nature of will. First, most people have never developed this faculty. They possess it in potential, but it is weak, untrained, like a muscle that has never been exercised. They have spent their lives responding to circumstances rather than dictating to them, reacting to emotions rather than commanding them, following the path of least resistance rather than cutting a new path through the wilderness. The will is not a magical gift distributed unequally by fate. It is a developed capacity, strengthened through use, fortified through the accumulation of small victories, made powerful through consistent practice. Every time you exercise your will successfully, every time you do the thing you decided to do despite not feeling like doing it, you add a small increment to the total strength of this faculty, until eventually it becomes powerful enough to intervene in even the most severe downward spirals. Second, and perhaps more importantly, most people fail to use their will because they do not believe they possess it. They have accepted, consciously or unconsciously, the materialist narrative that they are merely biological machines, responding mechanically to stimuli, controlled by their genetics and their conditioning and their circumstances, with no more real agency than a billiard ball bouncing across a table. This belief is itself a cause that produces effects. If you believe you have no power to choose, you will not exercise that power. And if you do not exercise it, it will remain weak, and its weakness will seem to confirm your belief that you never had it in the first place. This is the most insidious spiral of all. The spiral of disbelief in one's own agency, the momentum of learned helplessness, the accumulated weight of a lifetime spent being told, directly or indirectly, that you are a victim of forces beyond your control. Alan's teaching is a direct assault on this belief, a declaration of independence from the tyranny of mechanical causation, an assertion that at the core of your being exists a power that is not the product of past causes, but is itself the initiator of new causes, and that this power, when awakened and trained and directed with precision, can overcome any momentum, reverse any spiral, and redirect the entire trajectory of your life toward destinations that your conditioned self would have considered impossible. The will, therefore, is not merely a tool for personal improvement. It is the fundamental dividing line between those who create their destiny and those who are swept along by forces they do not understand. It is the difference between the pilot and the passenger, between the sculptor and the clay, between the author and the character. And here is the final crucial insight that Alan offers. The will does not operate in grand, dramatic gestures alone, though it certainly can do so when necessary. More often, it operates in small, quiet moments of decision, moments that seem insignificant at the time, but that accumulate over days and weeks and months into patterns of such strength that they become the new default, the new automatic, the new momentum. But this time momentum in the direction of your choosing, rather than the direction chosen for you by your unexamined habits and unconscious patterns. The master switch is pulled not once but constantly, each time you notice the spiral beginning to form and refuse to participate in it. Each time you feel the pull of the old pattern and choose the new one instead. Each time you stand at the fork in the road and consciously, deliberately, with full awareness of what you are doing and why, take the path that leads upward rather than the path that leads down. This is the will in action. Not a single heroic moment, but a lifetime of small victories, each one adding to the total momentum of your ascent, until one day you look back and realize that you are no longer the person who was caught in the spiral, that you have become someone entirely different, someone who was forged in the fire of conscious choice and tempered by the discipline of sustained will. Wallace Wattles, that other great architect of the mental sciences, teaches us a principle that dovetails with perfect precision into Alan's revelation about the will and the downward spiral. You cannot create wealth. You cannot build anything of lasting value. You cannot move forward into a better future if you are currently in the act of falling. This is not metaphor. This is mechanical reality. When a building is collapsing, you do not begin laying the foundation for the next floor. When a ship is sinking, you do not start planning the itinerary for your next voyage. When the plane is in a spiral toward the ocean, you do not pull out the in-flight magazine and start selecting your meal preferences. The absolute prerequisite for construction is stability, and stability is precisely what the downward spiral destroys with ruthless efficiency. In our previous exploration of Wattles' teaching, we constructed what we called the mental citadel, that fortress of consciousness designed to block the invasion of anxiety, worry, and fear, the toxic mental states that poison creativity and paralyze action. But the mental citadel, powerful as it is, performs a defensive function. It keeps the enemies of progress at bay, but it does not, by itself, reverse a fall that is already in progress.
I just finished developing the first stock trading tool of its kind, designed to help you dial up or dial down how.
This is where Alan's master switch becomes not merely complementary to Wattles' system, but absolutely essential to it. The will protocol stops the fall, arrests the downward momentum, brings you back to stable ground, and only then, only after stability has been achieved, can the work of construction begin. Think of it in terms of energy allocation, that most precious and finite resource that governs all achievement. When you are caught in a downward spiral, whether financial, emotional, relational, or spiritual, a massive percentage of your total available energy is being consumed by the spiral itself. Your mind races with anxious thoughts about how far you have fallen and how much further you might fall. Your emotions swing wildly between panic and despair, each swing burning energy like a furnace consuming fuel. Your attention, which Wattles correctly identifies as the laser that focuses creative power, becomes scattered across 1,000 worries, never resting long enough on any single point to generate the heat necessary for transformation. Your willpower, that limited daily reserve that determines whether you can sustain disciplined action, drains away in the constant effort to cope with the psychological weight of being in decline. Alan understood this energy crisis with crystal clarity. A man who is falling cannot simultaneously focus on rising because the fall itself demands all his attention, all his effort, all his resources just to prevent complete catastrophe. The spiral is not just pulling you down, it is bleeding you of the very energy you would need to pull yourself up, creating a vicious cycle where the fall makes escape harder, and the difficulty of escape accelerates the fall. This is why the sequence matters absolutely, why you cannot skip steps in the architecture of transformation. First, you must pull the master switch and arrest the spiral. This is Alan's contribution, the will protocol that we will detail with surgical precision in the sections that follow. Only after the fall has been stopped, after the hemorrhaging of energy has been stemmed, after you have achieved what pilots call stable flight, can you then begin to apply Wattles' creative principles, holding the vision of what you want to build, moving with purpose toward that vision, maintaining the mental state of gratitude and certainty that attracts resources and opportunities. But if you try to apply Wattles' principles while still in the spiral, you will fail. Not because the principles are flawed, but because you do not have a stable platform from which to apply them. It would be like trying to perform surgery while riding a roller coaster. The tools might be perfect, your knowledge might be complete, but the instability of your platform makes precision impossible. The will protocol provides that stable platform. It is the emergency brake that stops the roller coaster, the anchor that prevents further drift, the foundation stone upon which everything else can be built. Consider the practical implications for someone in financial freefall, that most common and most devastating of modern spirals. Their bank account dwindles week by week, bills pile up faster than income, creditors begin to circle, opportunities that were once available close off one by one, and the psychological pressure becomes a physical weight on their chest, making sleep difficult, focus impossible, clear thinking a distant memory. In this state, telling them to visualize abundance or think prosperously or be grateful for what they have is not just useless, it is cruel, because they do not have the energy or the stability to do these things effectively. Their mind is consumed with survival, with the immediate crisis, with the next bill and the next threat and the next humiliation. What they need first, before any creative principle can take root, is to stop the bleeding, to arrest the downward momentum, to say no with such force that the spiral breaks its grip. This is the master switch. Not a way to instantly solve all their problems, but a way to stop making them worse, to create a floor beneath which they will not fall, to establish a baseline of stability from which recovery becomes possible. Only after the spiral has been arrested can they begin to redirect energy away from crisis management and toward wealth creation. Allen and Wattles, though writing independently and emphasizing different aspects of mental science, are describing two phases of the same transformation. Allen gives you the emergency protocol for when you are in decline. Wattles gives you the construction protocol for when you are ready to rise. Allen teaches you how to pull out of the dive. Wattles teaches you how to fly once you are airborne. Allen focuses on the will as the force that breaks negative patterns. Wattles focuses on the imagination as the force that creates positive ones. But both men understood a truth that unites their teachings. The universe responds to causes, and the causes you set in motion through your thoughts and actions will produce effects with mathematical precision, whether those effects build you up or tear you down. The difference between a life of increasing prosperity and a life of increasing poverty is not luck, not circumstances, not the economy or your education or your starting point. It is simply the cumulative effect of whether the causes you are setting in motion are constructive or destructive, whether your mental and physical energy is being directed toward creation or being dissipated in crisis. The master switch allows you to interrupt destructive causation. The mental citadel allows you to protect constructive causation. Together, they form an integrated system for taking control of your destiny in a world that seems designed to strip that control away from you. The conservation of energy principle applies to consciousness just as it applies to physics. You have a finite amount of mental, emotional, and physical energy available to you in any given day, and this energy can either be invested or wasted. There is no third option. When you are in a downward spiral, the vast majority of this energy is being wasted. Wasted on worry about the past, wasted on anxiety about the future, wasted on the exhausting emotional turbulence of watching yourself fail, wasted on the cognitive load of managing an increasingly complex web of problems and deficits and threats. This waste is not a side effect of the spiral. It is the mechanism by which the spiral sustains itself. Because as long as you are expending all your energy on coping with decline, you have no energy left over for creating ascent. Allen's insight cuts through this trap like a sword. By using the master switch to stop the spiral, you instantly reclaim enormous amounts of energy that were being consumed by the fall. That energy, once reclaimed, becomes available for construction, for the application of Wattles' creative principles, for the sustained focus and disciplined action that builds wealth and achievement and the life you actually want, rather than the life that happens to you by default. This is why we speak of a protocol rather than a single decision or a momentary burst of willpower. A protocol is a sequence of precise steps, executed in order, designed to address a complex problem through...
Oh wow. What just happened? So, anyways, I'm not gonna lie, I'm tired and I had to go get some rest. But if you guys find these videos or videos like this interesting, you could go get access to them right here through my site on the screen. It's called The Power Source, thepowersource.card.co. These are very interesting videos that you could go watch yourself. And these videos will help you stay in alignment with yourself. And whenever you are having negative thoughts or feeling down about yourself, you're going to turn one of these videos on. And you're going to remember hey, don't think negative thoughts, because when I think negative, it causes negative emotions. And your emotions are like the electricity that produces the thoughts, like your manifestation. So you always want to make sure you're feeling good and staying on top of yourself so you could get the manifestations that you desire to have. Yeah, facts. Yeah, because you don't want negative thinking to slow it down. Let me tell you something. Your manifestations are always on the way. You just slow them down, which seems like they're never coming when you start thinking negative thinking. Like, we live in a emotional universe. We have a emotional God. And whenever you are co-creating with that, it goes off your emotions, then your thoughts second. So that means even if you are thinking positive, but your emotions, you're secretly doubting it, you're feeling bad about it, the universe will be able to pick up on how you really feel, and it's going to give you more of the stuff you don't like. So your emotions, is going to project what you want. That's why you have to think positive thoughts so you can feel positive. So if you find videos like this interesting, I do have more videos on my site. It's called thepowersource.card.co. Go over to go check it out. It is $85 to get access to these YouTube channels, which is very powerful YouTube channels. Like, it took for me to step into alignment with myself for me to attract it or manifest it to me. So I'm willing to give you guys this alignment that, took me a long time to find for myself, all right here through my site. So you must have attracted me somehow, some way, because how are you even here right now, right? And I'm giving you access to these same videos that I watch every single day, which helps me. So yeah, you get access to thepowersource.card.co. I will see you guys another time. Appreciate everybody for coming in, and I'll holler at you.